Regularly scheduled meeting for the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So at this time, Lori, if you can take a roll call.
Commissioner Gaskell. Commissioner Gatto. Commissioner Hamilton.
Present.
Commissioner Manning. Commissioner Merrick.
Here.
Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Tibbetts.
Present.
Commissioner Truxell.
Present.
Chairman Gray.
Present. And we do have a quorum. So at this time, we'll move on to communications. Dan, is there any communications?
Yeah, I have a couple today. Welcome to our new commissioners, Brian Tibbetts and Terry Hamilton, and thank you guys for volunteering and jumping right in because we needed you today for quorum. So welcome to them. Maybe after the meeting you can introduce yourself or maybe give some background of what you've done, your experience in Tinley Park. But we can maybe do that at the good of the order at the end of the meeting. The other one is that Chairman Gray is going to recuse himself from the first item, Atlas Putty, as he did with the workshop, just because his company has done work for the developer previously. And Commissioner Truxell will serve as the acting chair during that time. So thank you for him for stepping up into the acting chair role. And that's all I have for the communications at this time.
Okay, thanks, Dan, and welcome, Terry and Brian. We appreciate you getting in here to give us that quorum, so I hope we'll be the first of many. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 5th, 2022 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Merrick. All those in favor of approving the May 5th, 2022 minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. We're going to move on to item 1. At this time, I will recuse myself, and Commissioner Truxell will be acting chair for this item. Okay.
The first item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing to consider recommending that the village board grant Steve Vernon of Vernon Development Incorporated, petitioner developer, on behalf of Atlas Putty Products Company, a special use for substantial deviation from the North Star Business Center PUD at property located at 8301 185th Street in the M1 PD General Manufacturing North Star Business Center PUD. Site plan, architectural approval, and final plat of subdivision approval is also requested as part of the development. May I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Merrick. Can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Tibbetts. I will ask for a voice vote. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Before we proceed, I would like to note that I have received certification, one of these papers, right here, certification of the public hearing notice as being published in a local newspaper as required by state law. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this matter in the public, in the audience? I do not see that. Let's move on. Staff, proceed with the presentation.
Thanks, Acting Chairman. So this was covered in a workshop at the last meeting, so I won't dive into all the details. For the most part, there was only a couple open items that are at the Plan Commission really had either concerns with or were kind of just not quite wrapped up yet. And we've worked with those with the petitioner since that time. So this is Atlas Putty Products. The gist of this is that they're looking to expand here in Tinley Park, and they want to be near their current headquarters, which is on 185th, and right off I-80. You can see it as you're driving on I-80. It's just north of the way station on the north side of it. So they're looking to basically take a piece of land that is actually part of that lot of their current headquarters, combine that with what's currently kind of an office building that they would be demolishing, and then construct a new property there. The zoning of it is M1 PUD, and it is located in the North Star Business Center PUD districts. And very similar style buildings and uses, mostly kind of internal manufacturing, warehouse distribution type uses in that area. But kind of a newer industrial park, kind of nice, a little bit newer buildings out there, so. The proposed use would be an 87,267 square foot warehouse building that would be there, and the docks for that building would kind of align with the adjacent property to the west, which is their existing headquarters. There's a few exceptions that they are requesting as part of this, and terminology-wise, an exception is basically specific to when it's in a planned unit development, a PUD. Very similar to a variation, meaning they don't necessarily meet the letter of the law in terms of the code. But within a PUD, you look at it in context of how does this relate to the PUD area, the actual planned development, subdivision or location. So you're looking at it more in that context, not in the context of how does this relate to everything in the village. So they have a few exceptions there. Most of them are from the Urban Design Overlay District, which is, it's a good idea and concept. It's trying to, with the land we have left available, it's trying to make it a little more walkable, a little more urban design oriented. So push buildings towards the street, add sidewalks, parking in the back, shared parking, things like that. Sounds great in principle. In an industrial park that's largely already developed, it's really tough to make that fit sometimes. We've also, the board has kind of struggled with it on like gas stations. It's really tough to make a gas station really walkable when it's auto-oriented just by its nature. We reviewed the site plan, so there's two entrances, parking lots from both North Star Court and then 185th Street. There's no exterior storage proposed, just the truck docks where trucks would pull up, dock, and either load or unload their materials. There's a dumpster enclosure location shown on here. They may or may not actually construct that. They may have an internal kind of compactor system in one of the truck docks, but that is there in case this building is ever split, in case there's a different user that needs that. We kind of have it within the site plan that it's been designed for. Sidewalks, they're not going to be placing sidewalks on this property. They will pay a cash in lieu because it is a requirement. So what that means is instead of them having a floating sidewalk across their property that doesn't serve a purpose, doesn't connect to anything, it won't anytime in the near future, that the village then has to maintain a sidewalk that's not used. We'd rather have them pay a cash in lieu, which is the cost of that sidewalk, that then we can put into the bigger system that's out there. So maybe then you go on 80th Avenue and you get sidewalks there, or it starts working its way this way. So we do have a sidewalk gap program in place, and that money kind of goes towards being able to develop the larger system in Tinley and probably put that money to better use than in the middle of an industrial park where it doesn't connect to anything. So we did set that as a condition for the cash in lieu payment. And then engineering-wise, with any of these projects, we do have a condition on there that there is still some final engineering aspects to work out. So kind of through the permit process, there can be little tweaks, and everything's just kind of subject to that final engineer. One of the items that was open was the landscaping, basically not having landscaping at the corner of the building. That's not very visible, but it's basically between the Steiner Electric building, which is to the southeast, and then this new building. Just because of the way the lots lay out, it's not very visible, but we did want to see some kind of landscaping there, foundational or buffer yard. So they came back and proposed carrying kind of what they had done around the rest of the building, just with some foundational bushes and shrubs around that. Resolve that. Architectural wise, here's again what we're looking at. Kind of your typical, atypical, I guess, industrial warehouse building, kind of multi-purpose in that can be manufacturing, warehouse, distribution. As it moves forward, it's precast panels, so they're precast concrete, which is permitted in this industrial district at this size building. So if you had a 2,000 square foot building, you'd actually have to do it in like brick or stone if it's a smaller building, but as you get bigger scale, I believe over 80, it's either over 60 or 80,000 precast panels become permitted in the M1 zoning district. So they've used kind of the corners on the building to take those architectural elements, kind of make them stand out from the rest of the building so it's not so flat. And here was their original proposals. And one of the concerns we had was basically on the north elevation, which is kind of the main visible one on 185th Street, that it was just kind of a large expanse there, kind of a flat area. And we asked for the petitioner just kind of see what they could do to kind of help break that up, knowing that doing those big architectural elements are kind of expensive. If there was something else they could do kind of in between. So they did come back and they are doing that. So they're kind of doing it'll be kind of more flat with the facade and not protrude out, but it does kind of carry that same design aspect as they are doing in the corners through the building. The other change they kind of had with this was the color scheme. So they're not quite set on the exact color scheme, but now they're kind of taking that red, the kind of deep red that was there, and they're going more with kind of gray tones on the property. So it's not going to be painted hot pink or anything like that, but there is still some flexibility in that color scheme of exactly what's going to be there. And sometimes that changes over time anyways, just depending on who the tenant is. Sometimes they just want, they're like, when Amazon comes in, they paint it blue. And it's able to be kind of changed that way, but you don't want the whole building to be blue and really stand out. So they do have this color scheme though, kind of white, gray, black type tones. And then signage, parking, lighting, all kind of code compliant there. The signs, they're kind of just reusing the existing ground sign. And they haven't quite figured out wall signs yet, but they'll comply with what the zoning code requires there. And then last is the Platus Subdivision is what you're recommending today too. And that's really consolidating the two lots, putting easements in place, putting cross access in place for the drive aisle. And then it's also vacating a couple existing easements that ran between the properties, where they're now going to be placing that new building. So that's kind of my quick summary. The biggest two open items from the workshop was just the landscaping and then the architecture tweaks that we were looking for. So we think both of those have been resolved to staff's liking. So hand it over
Okay.
back to you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Does the petitioner have anything to add at this time?
I think Dan covered it, but I'm happy to come up and answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from the commission?
Just one that came to my mind. I saw there was a lot of notes about future division of the property and splitting of it. Is that an automatic then after this is approved, or will the petitioners have to come back for approval for that?
I think that was more to do with the building, is what you're asking. So they've kind of designed it as a way that just economically, I think they're looking at taking the whole building, but going forward economically, it's just in their interest to have a building that they're not using part of it, they could bring in another tenant. But I don't think they're gonna divide the land. It would just be kind of, sometimes you have industrial buildings with multiple tenants, some you have one. They just try to build in some flexibility, so it wasn't so narrowly tailored to their needs
Yeah,
that somebody else
Sounds like
is
a good
gonna.
idea. But no additional petition would be required at that point?
No, just a build-out permit. If they were putting up a wall or something, it would just be all permits. It wouldn't come back before this group.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Tibbetts, anything to say? No? Commissioner Merrick, any questions?
So, Dan, the only question I have really is one about sidewalks, and it's not, so it's a bigger picture question and not, it's related to this, but not about this, so. And that is, the difference between cement and blacktop and where you use them. And as somebody who's interested, as you know, in walkable, rideable, runnable community, cement sucks. And blacktop is a lot more forgiving. And I know cement is also more economical because it takes less upkeep and whatever. And I'm just interested in knowing when we use what where.
It might be a follow-up question I can get back to with our village engineer and our
Okay.
public works department. It kind of goes by, we have a little bit of a plan, like a bike plan. So those multi-use paths, which is the blacktop portion, it's usually more on kind of major corridors that they use those, and not within traditional neighborhoods, because there tends to be more maintenance with those, but they're cheaper in the first place, so it's kind of like a give and take
Got it.
on those. But I think they use them more on kind of major corridors where you might want bikes, but within kind of neighborhood subdivisions, they tend to keep it with the concrete, which I think people like the look of usually more. They also take less regular maintenance, so to have the entire village in asphalt would take a lot of paving and seal coating.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's some accessibility points to that too, I guess, that like sidewalks need to meet certain slopes, and so to just be accessible for a wheelchair that can't go over a certain amount. So the multi-use paths aren't necessarily tied to those as much. But I can always ask and maybe
Yeah,
get you
that'd be
some
cool.
more information,
Yeah,
because I
thank you.
don't make those decisions all the time.
Cool. But I do like the updates, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
These are,
And we do try and
This is
push
nice.
for sidewalks on, there are sites we've pushed for that where the subdivision doesn't have it, but it's either at the end of it or, hey, we're getting to this, we want the sidewalks there. You gotta start somewhere. So sometimes we will push for them. They just didn't see them starting to put them through here anytime soon.
yeah, and I run through there all the time because there's not much traffic on the streets, right? And it wouldn't make sense, obviously, to throw something.
You mean you wanna go from the street onto the sidewalk and then back on the street?
I just stay on the street normally.
Kinda figured.
I just had one question about the paint color change. Is there any, just a personal preference, or I kind of like the maroon, but that's me.
If you're gonna, sorry, if you're gonna talk, just because it's public hearing, let us.
Do I need to swear him in, Dan, for a paint question? Okay. Can you state your name and sign in, please?
Matthew Payton, owner of Atlas Putty.
Okay.
And so it's just a personal preference, and we wanted to tie it in. We purchased the property at 8301 West 183rd Street. It was the old Vision building, had some gray and white overtones, undertones there. And then it was just trying to tie them all in together,
Okay.
So that's really it. So
All right.
It, like I said, the whole goal is to bring, unity, to
That's
it.
fine.
And not just have, 3 or 4 different spots and everything looks different.
So where we saw maroon, that would be which color then, the gray?
So that would be, it's a dark gray. Dan kind of said that it was black, but it's more of a real dark gray. And then there's, even though it's called Black Fox, it's a Sherwin-Williams swatch, and those colors, kind of go along with each other. they may be a shade or two different. Basically what we did is, we rode along the corridors, I-80, 355 and whatnot, and there was a building, I'll call it right, just north of the Bo Jackson Dome,
Oh, yeah.
if that helps you out on
Yeah.
355. They're doing a lot of construction along that area, and there's a building that kind of stuck out, so, went and snapped a few photos. Now it's, we can go in there and kind of identify, but, the actual colors, but they stood out and they were nice.
Nice.
They complemented each other, but they're not gonna be, anything that's gonna be an embarrassment to us or the community.
No, that's fine. I was just curious more than
Yeah.
anything, so thank you.
Sure.
Can you just do a quick swear in?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
forgot about the swearing in, so
Sorry.
sorry about that.
I know it's just paint colors, but we'll follow the procedure.
Do you swear to or affirm that the evidence that you just provided is the truth, was the truth, and whole truth?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Nice amendment.
Yeah,
Yeah. I kind of like the maroon too, but it's one of those that it could change in the future too.
Okay.
If somebody wanted to go there, so
That's
it
fine.
could be a little flexible, so.
at this time, I'll ask if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to make any comments or has any questions. Seeing none,
I'll let your comments be known, maybe that'll sway us into go the other way.
It's just, there's a lot of gray in this world. I don't know, I start going towards,
There we go.
put a little color in it.
Thank you, guys.
thank you. So seeing there's no further questions or discussions at this time, I'd like to ask if we can have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
So moved by Commissioner Merrick, seconded by Commissioner Tibbetts. Staff, can you please, okay, sorry, one more thing. May have a voice vote. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion's carried. At this point, staff, can you please present the standards?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick summary instead of going through them all. They're on the screen and within the packets and in the staff report. So it basically comes down to this being a already developed area and the building fitting in within that developed area in terms of style, use, within the request that they're asking for. So, and then overall, this being a positive economic development that allows a successful business to continue to expand and within Tinley Park and employ additional people where the current property, particularly the vacant property, does not do that. So that's just kind of the summary of those standards there for a special use.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Yep.
So at this
And
time,
then- Yeah, and then we have 3 motions for
yeah,
this one.
3 most. So did any commissioners have any questions about the standards that Dan was just talking about? No? Okay, at this point, let's move into the motions. So there's 3 motions, as Dan mentioned, and may I have a motion regarding the special use for substantial deviation, please.
Chair, I can make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grants a special use for a substantial deviation from the North Star Business Center PUD and exceptions from the zoning ordinance to the petitioner Steve Vernon of Vernon Development, Inc., on behalf of Atlas Putty Products CO, to permit changes to the approved lots and to permit the redevelopment of the property located at 8301 185th Street in the M1 PD General Manufacturing North Star Business Center PUD zoning district, in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by the village staff and the staff report, subject to the following conditions. 1, approval is subject to final engineering plan review and approval. 2, approval is subject to the approval of the final plat by the village board and recording of the plat with the county recorder of deeds prior to issuance of any permits.
Motion made by Commissioner Merrick. May I have a second? Second to the motion? Okay, Commissioner Merrick made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Hamilton. Lawyer, can you please take a roll call?
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Merrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Tibbetts?
Yes.
Acting Chair Truxell?
Yes. Let's move. The motion carries. Do we take a roll call? So the roll call passes then, right, Lori?
Yes.
All ayes, no nays. Motion's carried. And we'll move on to the second motion. May I have a motion regarding the site plan architectural approval, please?
Okay, I can make another motion. I'll make a motion to grant the petitioner, Steve Vernon of Vernon Development, Inc., on behalf of Atlas Putty Products Company, site plan and architectural approval to construct an approximately 87,267 square foot industrial warehouse development on the property located at 8301 185th Street in the M1 PD, General Manufacturing North Star Business Center PUD zoning district, in accordance with the plans submitted and listed herein and subject to the following conditions. 1, site plan approval is subject to the approval of special use for a PUD deviation and final plat by the village board. 2, site plan approval is subject to the final engineering plan review and approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Merrick. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tibbetts. Lori, roll call, please.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes?
Commissioner Merrick?
Yes.
Commissioner Tibbetts?
Yes.
Acting Chair Truxell?
Yes. All votes were ayes. The motion is carried. We have one final motion that we need to get for the final plat. Can I have a motion, please?
It's a good starter one. Or Eric can do it again.
We could, can you change the screen, since I'm following it that way?
Oh, yes.
I'll defer to others if they'd like.
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to recommend that the village board grant approval to the petitioner Steve Vernon of Vernon Development Incorporated on behalf of Atlas Putty Products Company. Final plat approval for the Atlas Putty Subdivision dated March 22nd, 2022, subject to the condition that the plat is subject to final review and approval by the village engineer and village attorney prior to recording.
Thank you, Commissioner Tibbetts. May I have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner Hamilton. Lori, roll call, please.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Commissioner Merrick?
Yes.
Commissioner Tibbetts?
Yes.
Acting Chair Truxell?
Yes. All votes are ayes. The motion is carried. This motion will go to the village board on Tuesday, June 7th, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be for first and final reading, so that should be the last meeting there. So we'll be in contact.
Good job.
Okay. Thanks again to Commissioner Truxell for stepping in so nicely. We'll move on to item 2 on tonight's agenda. Item 2 is a public hearing to consider recommending that the village board grant Paul Spass, the property owner, a masonry variation from section V.C.4.B of the zoning ordinance to permit a new residential home to be constructed without the required first floor face brick on the property at 9260 Pleasant Avenue in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District. May I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Truxell made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner Merrick. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion, or any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. I have received public notice that the public hearing has been published in a local newspaper. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter will be sworn in, but after the staff's presentation. So staff, at this time, if you could please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Gray. So the property, subject property is 9260 Pleasant Avenue. This is currently, for the most part, a vacant lot that is located south, in the neighborhood southwest of 183rd Street and 92nd Avenue. Here's an aerial that shows the nature of the lot. It's a long rectangular lot, a little under 72, just under 72 feet by 164 feet. Currently has a detached garage on there that is proposed to be demolished. For the consideration tonight is a masonry variation for new construction for a single-family home. So the lot itself, just a little bit more background, it's a little under 12,000 square feet, which is technically non-conforming to R2 zoning district's current standards, but as part of that development was granted a variation in the past with other lots in this whole subdivision neighborhood when they annexed into the village. So to talk about that neighborhood, this is the Tinley Garden Subdivision. I noted it here up on screen. It's a little hard to read, a little bit easier to see in the staff report. It's highlighted, outlined in red. That is the southwest corner of 183rd and 92nd. It's an older neighborhood, and the annexation was back in 1997. Previously was Will County. So there's a wide variety in age of homes, style of homes, types of building materials. The lots are, as I noted before, very long and rectangular. So, there's some that in itself is a unique character to that type of subdivision. Just to contrast it briefly to the east side of 92nd Avenue is what you'd see more contemporary development that would meet code. As the Timbers, is it Timbers Edge, Timbers Point subdivision. So those homes, when staff drove through, they're all masonry compliant, and much newer, more squarish type of lot configuration. So, and also just one last thing to mention, the zoning, it's R2 in the Tinley Gardens neighborhood and R2 as well to the east. Across the street from 183rd is R5, but that's across a major arterial. So for the background on the code, so in late 2019, there was a code amendment that moved masonry requirements, which we have here in the village, from the building code over to our zoning ordinance. So there were commercial and residential aspects to that. Both are regulated. Residential didn't really change. It was just maintaining this face brick or stone requirement on the full first floor of homes. So the way that any sort of requests for relief to that were handled before was by a sort of masonry waiver that was handled through what was a community development committee that I believe then went to the board. So that had a bit more flexibility from what I understand in how they were judged. They weren't variations per se. So they looked a lot at that time at the type of character of the neighborhood, how properties fit in and such. So, relatively recently, from late 2019, now as part of the zoning ordinance is officially a variation that requires this review by Plan Commission and then for recommendation to go to the board. So up on the screen here is the zoning code requirement, so I can read that. In all single-family detached, single-family attached townhomes, and in all single-family semi-detached dwellings, exterior walls shall be constructed of face brick or decorative stone. Said construction must commence from the finished grade and shall extend to the uppermost portion of the first story of such dwellings. So the petitioner, Paul Spass, who's present here tonight, has a request for variation to propose the new single-family home. He proposes 2 stories, and he has requested to do the majority of it in vinyl siding and just the lower 4 feet in a band of brick that wraps around the entire structure. One thing to point, initially the petitioner proposed just the front, and staff worked with the petitioner to explain the intent of the code and to lessen the degree of the variation request. So the petitioner in the final submittal had wrapped that around, so all sides of the elevations, as noted in the packet, have the brick. 4 feet of brick is at the base. As you can see in the drawing on top, there's a windowsill, so it kind of blinds the base of that windowsill and just kind of continues around. Petitioner's reasoning for such variation, he brought a few points up. One is, this is a style that, having this thinner band of brick is seen in some other community developments. He provided a few photographs of one in Plainfield, one in Naperville, I believe. He noted there's some other development in New Lenox that also has some examples of that. He personally prefers the aesthetic, so that it doesn't appear as one story stacked on another story. So this way, the siding kind of goes into the first story, it's a little more integrated. And he pointed out, importantly, the existing mix and inconsistencies of the exterior finishes in the neighborhood. And so this neighborhood is a Tinley Garden subdivision. It's Pleasant Avenue and then a couple of streets to the north and south. So here is the proposed rendering of how it will look. So you can see the side, most of the siding, the brick. And then, so staff has noted some, what could be considered possibly relevant standards. Basically, there's, for a variation, the formal standards are those that are in our code, which I included in the back of the packet. There's really no specific standards that concern architectural design per se. When you look at how it fits in with older neighborhoods. So it may be helpful to look at how we do a commercial architectural plan review. So I noted these points up above, also in the staff report, asking some questions. If the structure is compatible with the neighboring properties and the existing housing stock, if the materials are high quality and durable. Again, the petitioner is proposing vinyl siding with that brick base. Do the proposed materials negatively affect the home's attractiveness or future marketability? Do the materials complement the style and design of the home, et cetera? Some other points to consider is reviewing, you want to consider and review how the existing neighborhood architecture, if it helps ensure the character and quality. Ideally, you don't want a neighborhood that degrades in that quality over time. You want to consider the fit, compatibility in the neighborhood. You want to enhance it. You don't want to look at decreasing the property values. You want to look to maintain value over time. So I went out to the neighborhood, went through the Tinley Tinley Gardens subdivision, looked at the streets to the north and south, focused on Pleasant Avenue. So out of the 29 lots, only 8 have some form of brick. Most of these of the homes were vinyl siding. There were 3 vacant lots. Overall, there's a big mix of styles. And, basically it's shown here. I showed in the staff report, you can see in orange are ones that were immediately observable as not compliant. The ones in solid green appeared to be possibly fully compliant. I didn't walk around the rear to see if it wrapped around, but just from a drive-by. And then sort of hatched in green were ones that were obviously not fully compliant, and they may have added just on the front face or only partially up. So these are also more photos that kind of show those conditions of what's on the street. You may want to consider this character and how it if you want to look at the neighborhood to transition or to maintain. Since there's most without vinyl and they're older and newer ones with recently. So that concludes staff presentation. Petitioners here. I have standards available.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Mr. Spass, do you want to approach the lectern and state your name, sign the book, and I'll swear you in.
My name is Paul Spass.
Okay. Okay, Paul, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, proceed.
So, thank you very much, Lori and Dan, for taking the time and working with me on this project. Again, this is a very unique neighborhood. It was formerly an unincorporated section of Tinley Park. I actually live in an unincorporated section of Payless Heights. And, this is, I just see from the pictures and then some of the work that Lori did, going out in there and taking pictures of the existing homes on that street. It's just a mix of things, This is a neighborhood where you can't really get too crazy with budgets and blowing things out of the water. But this particular house that you're going to see that's going to be going up in there is going to be the nicest in the neighborhood on both streets by far. And one of the biggest reasons for me, like Lori had stated, is the fact that, I'm not a big fan. I know a lot about architecture and how it looks, and a lot of these houses and subdivisions that are in Tinley Park and some of the surrounding older subdivisions that have been built have required the first floor brick. To me, it looks like there's two houses stacked on top of each other. Some of the pictures that I provided are 3 subdivisions in Naperville, Plainfield, and one in Lamont that they're getting rid of all that. And it's just what the newest trend is. It just looks more uniform. I think it brings the house together as a whole versus, being first floor brick. It's definitely not for cost reasons, because it's really not that much more. It's just more for aesthetics, and that's for me, I'm big about this. I actually just finished a house that I'm actually going to be using the same brick, and I just did the same thing. It's just a cleaner line, it's a cleaner look. In this particular neighborhood, again, I'm requesting that we go through this variance and get approved, just because of the amount of mixed homes that are in there. If you take this into some of the newer subdivisions, again, on the other side of, north side of 183rd, obviously those are all, it was a huge subdivision at one time, and, putting something like that over there, obviously I wouldn't probably get your support in that, but during, since this was annexed in back into Tinley Park back in '97, it's just things that they didn't do over there back in the day, and it's just a hodgepodge of different mix of homes in there. So, that's about it, really. It's just merely for aesthetics reasons, and I think what some of the new builders and developers are doing in the surrounding areas with newer homes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Spass. I'm going to ask some of the commissioners for comments. If you want to sit tight there, that's fine too. They may have questions for you. Beginning with Commissioner Merrick, any comments?
So it does look like it fits into the character of the neighborhood, as far as I can tell. And in fact, in some ways, you would think that the new style would add to the neighborhood and make it better. So,
Okay, excellent, Commissioner Merrick. Commissioner Truxell?
No, I agree. I think it's going to be a nice addition to that neighborhood, actually. That's all I had, really.
Okay.
It looks nice. Nice job, Paul.
Thanks.
Commissioner Tibbet?
Yeah, I think running face brick up all sides of that house would not be aesthetically pleasing. I think that, can you go back to that picture? I think the way that you have this home right now with the 4 foot of brick.
Yeah.
Looks fantastic.
Yeah.
If you go down McCarthy Road and 131st, in that area, there's homes that look just like this.
Yeah.
They're absolutely beautiful.
Mhm.
And there's multiple different types of homes over there too, but I think, I agree with you that it will make the neighborhood want to get better.
Sure. I mean, it's just about, things that change over time, You see, all these big new homes and developments going up, and you just don't see that anymore, and what, we're the current R values, I'm a contractor as well, so, I mean, the current R values that, they've increased over the last years to, I don't know really what the real reason was of having brick at the first floor, but like you said, some of the things change over time, and these newer, bigger subdivisions, this is all you're seeing out there, so. It's just a nice look, that's all. In my opinion, it just brings the house together as a whole. Adding some, nice brick to the bottom, but yet really tying it all in as one home instead of, you just drive down, you see these houses that, in my opinion, are just stacked on top of each other,
Sharp. It looks sharp.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yep, same comments as have already been voiced. It's going to be one of the nicer homes in the neighborhood.
Sure.
Okay, and Mr. Spass, my comments are pretty much echo what the fellow commissioner said. The lot is unique as staff presented. It is narrower and longer than most lots, and as you mentioned, it was annexed in 1997, so 25 years ago. So that unique nature of the lot, as Lori presented in her staff report, where you have some with all siding, some with partial brick. And I want to commend you for working with staff to put the brick all around.
Yeah.
All sides. I think
Sure.
that's going to look very sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, having that brick on there, on the bottom, is just better for, the home itself versus having siding all the way to the bottom,
Right,
for,
and this is a really nice rendering.
It is.
It
Thank you.
shows you what we can expect, and I did appreciate the extra effort of getting those photos from Naperville and Plainfield, so
Yeah.
it gives us a real look at it too. So I think it looks great. I think it will fit into that kind of unique, and as some of the commissioners had said, even probably improve the look of the block.
Sure.
So with that, I'm okay with the variation as requested, but you may sit down now,
Thank you.
Mr.
Appreciate
Spass, and we're going to close the public hearing at this time, as long as nobody has any further questions. Okay, so can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Truxell made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I heard Commissioner Tibbet. So all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Staff, can you present the standards at this time?
So as I noted before, the standards are the same ones that we see for variations typically. First one is regards to the reasonable return. So staff has drafted these standards to be in support of the variation for the commission's consideration. So response would be, while the property in question can yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed, the design style and its compatibility to the neighborhood's existing design are compromised if the code requirements were to be met. 2, regarding unique circumstances, this is an infill development. It's one of 4 vacant lots on the block. It's an established neighborhood. The new home will look compatible with the neighborhood. The proposed design works with the neighborhood's existing exterior materials and architecture. And 3, regarding essential character of the locality. The neighborhood has that large mix of architectural styles and exterior building materials. The proposed materials will fit in, and the design and quality of the home is not harmed by the reduction in the height of masonry. Also, as noted in the report, here's the additional 4th standard for the commission's consideration. And that concludes staff standards.
Okay, thank you, Lori. At this time, I may have a motion regarding this item.
I make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner Paul Spass a masonry variation from section 5C4B of the zoning ordinance to permit a new single-family home to be constructed with 4 foot of first-floor masonry instead of the required full first floor at the property located at 9260 Pleasant in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District, consistent with the list of submitted plans, and adopt findings of facts as proposed in the May 19, 2022 staff report.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Tibbetts. Lori, could I have a roll call at this time?
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Merrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Tibbetts,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxell,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. The motion is carried. So this item will go to the village board on, is it Tuesday, June 7th?
Yes.
Okay, Tuesday, June 7th. So, Mr. Spass, please be in attendance or get with staff on how you can get information to. Yep, good luck. Yep. Okay, moving on to item 3. Item 3 is a public hearing to consider recommending that the village board amend certain sections of the zoning ordinance to carry over portions of the current building code into the zoning ordinance where they are better served. Regulations include driveway location, driveway width, storage shed size, accessory structure locations, and other miscellaneous regulations. At this time, I have a motion to open the public hearing. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, to continue the public hearing that was opened on May 5th to 2022.
So moved.
Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Merrick to continue the public hearing. All those in favor of continuing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. I have received certification of the public hearing notice being published in the local newspaper. Anyone wishing to speak will be sworn in after staff's presentation. Staff, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this is a continuation of the public hearing since we ran out of time at the last one. It was 10 o'clock. That we had a workshop on this as well, without any major concerns coming from the Plan Commission. It's kind of made to be simple, so most of the codes that are being brought into the zoning code here are essentially exactly how it exists in the building code now. So what we've done is update the building codes to the newest 2021 ICC codes. We kind of have this hodgepodge Tinley Park Comprehensive Building Code, which isn't very typical. So what we're trying to, most communities just adopt ICC building codes and then have a separate ordinance that just calls out, here's the changes we're making to the international standards that are local. Instead, we kind of have this whole separate building code, and some stuff is building related, some of it really wasn't, it was more zoning. So things like driveways and accessory structure locations. And, actually, the very first thing we kind of brought over was those masonry requirements for commercial and residential buildings. So that was kind of the biggest one where the point wasn't to be any more strict through a variation process in that, but really the intent there was you guys look at aesthetics and development and those types of things, and it made more sense to run it through this process in the zoning code than it did to go through like this, like almost made up, like village board process that went to a committee of the board, and none of them really have the knowledge or the thoughts of aesthetics and the zoning code and development codes, which is where they kind of look to you guys to analyze that. So that's why we are bringing these items into the building code. I tried to, any changes that were made were mostly to be clarifications or something that maybe was how we interpreted it anyways for the previous years, and we just wanted to clarify that. So I didn't add in any major changes that we'd have to run through and go, here's how it looks this way, here's how it looks this way. It's just kind of trying to keep the standard. The most significant change of what we did do was really related to driveways. Under our current regulations, there's really no, it limits it at essentially the apron where it goes from public right-of-way property to like a private property, where the driveway officially starts. But outside of that, there really wasn't too many just allowed driveways in front yards and all that. So we wanted to be able to put some type of reasonable limits on it to just say you can't pave your entire front yard and call it a driveway. So we did kind of just put some maximums on those driveway regulations. In the packet was just kind of a breakdown of the different regulations, how they were getting carried over. Then we also had a red line kind of draft of the current code, kind of where we're plugging those into the zoning code. So again, at the workshop, didn't seem like anybody had too many concerns about what was being carried over. Most of it's just keeping it as it is. But you would start to see if somebody really wanted a 70-foot wide driveway, they would then be before you for a variance where you've probably, this group hasn't seen it before, so. But maybe they have a 700-foot wide lot, and it makes sense, like there could be weird situations. That's it for the staff report. And we have the red line version of the codes that would be carried into an ordinance form to go to the village board. So.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask the commission for comments. I'll begin with Commissioner Hamilton. Any comments on any of the text amendments? changes?
I don't know if this is the right place to ask for a clarification of the process. Apparently, right now, Tinley Park goes by a building code, a specific building code, and they do apply to buildings in Tinley Park. But if somebody wants a variation from that, a variance from that, they don't come here right now. They have to go through the city, the trustees, and who set up a committee, and
There's kind of two processes, so if it was.
so it's more
very-
cumbersome than right now.
Yeah.
It's more cumbersome, the current process.
I don't know if it's more cumbersome or just less transparent and clear, and less having the right people review what the change is. So I don't know if it's necessarily more cumbersome. It's a little different if it was our code. That's where it went to the committee and the village board. If you're varying from the ICC international codes, there's a whole separate, like, technical council that would, if you say, I want to construct this building differently than the building codes allow me to, you'd have to go to them and say, if I'm going to build this out of pencils, it's still going to work and be safe for somebody, instead of lumber. So it depends which part you are varying from and which process. This is really taking this stuff that really isn't building related. It's more aesthetic related, lot related, location when you're looking at properties, and not really building code. The building department doesn't care if the driveway covers the whole front yard. It's safe, it's constructed correctly, right? It's not gonna hurt anybody, but it doesn't look good. It's kind of more of an aesthetic, zoning related question. So that's why we're moving it to have you guys review.
Makes sense, thank you.
Any other comments, Commissioner?
No, not-
Okay, Commissioner Tibbet,
I agree with it.
okay, excellent. Commissioner Truxell?
I'm just curious, how many more things are you moving over from building to zoning? Is there a whole long list, or?
We have had almost no, like, anything else beyond this, no, this is everything we're
This is it?
moving over.
Okay,
Yeah, and we don't really get requests for these. The most common ones that we had were masonry requests, and we already moved that over. So-
all right.
And we've had 2 of those in the last, since 2019 now. Because we really only push those if somebody's got, like, in an established neighborhood like this. If somebody was trying to do that in Brookside Glen, we'd probably say,
Yeah.
no, just match the surrounding area. So.
Okay, thanks, Dan. No further questions for me. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Merrick?
This seems like a straightforward process.
Okay, thanks. Dan, I just have just a couple things. One, I just want to get clarification, and it's, I looked at the redlined items. One was the driveway, and I just want to get clarification. So the maximum width is 40 feet, and the minimum width is 10 feet, but where the apron meets a road, it's maximum 30 feet. So you'll have a 30 feet flare out, it'll go, but it can bulge then to 40 feet?
Yeah, so what you do is you have a 30-foot curb depression, and that's our current code requirement.
Right.
So maximum 30 feet, and then let's say you have a 3-car garage. It kind of,
Right.
it kind of extends out, and so that's kind of where we were.
So that's where, when I hear that, I'm thinking of the bulge it makes sense to bulge it out by the garage, or sometimes people have that like ancillary basketball court, it's a little wider, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So it would
But the
have to
way it's
kinda
written,
add-
somebody could actually bulge it out right after the 30-inch, or 30-foot flare out, it necks, right, and then goes to 40.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring that up because I was just trying to visualize that. Hopefully, it's used appropriately, I guess. It probably doesn't need further clarification as written. I just was curious. The other one is, I agree with what in principle with it was, this is, setbacks for properties where it says, except for incidental uses, no structure shall be constructed on a dedicated public or private utility easement, nor shall any structure be constructed as to encroach upon any easement. and I agree with that. No portion, here's the new part, no portion of the eave, gutter, or roof overhang shall project into or over any dedicated easement, which I agree with too in principle. I know we had a couple projects in Tinley Park. I think one of them was off of 183rd Street where there's a sign from a person's decking company that is on a dedicated easement. So the petitioner at the time understood that if the easement had to get to be repaired, or what, if there's a utility that needs to get repaired, that he would be on the hook for something like that. And I remember there was a case, and I don't think it was an easement, it might have just been another property, where the surveyor had the property lines mislabeled. And so where somebody's edge of the property, it really wasn't where they thought it was. So, and I've seen a property recently, not in Tinley Park, but in Darien, where they had, for whatever reason, they had a garage or a pole barn right up against a person's property line. And so like if you have gutters, you don't want to put water onto somebody's property, right, for sure. But they're saying you can't even have a gutter to hang over it. I mean, as long as it daylights on their property, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But I'm just saying, there may be some weird instances, and I'm sure that's why it would come in front of us. But I've seen some weird stuff, in my time as a planning commission and outside of that, where there may be some, issues with that. Do you see where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, so in practice, so there's all different kinds of easements. You have drainage easements,
Yeah.
utility easements, overland drainage easements, cross-access easement. I mean, there's thousands of different, you can make an easement for anything, right? It's
yeah.
just giving some rights. So some of it is dependent upon how that easement language is crafted. Most of the time, they're part of the original subdivision, but you could, after the fact, record utility easements. NICOR comes in and records easements over properties. Sometimes they're blanket easements that cover everything except for the building. So there's all different kinds. In practice, the point is we usually get whoever or whatever has rights to that easement, as long as they approve it, will allow something to be constructed in it, as long as it meets our general setbacks. So if it's a utility easement and all the utility companies go, we're fine with this. Nobody's using it. We're perfectly fine with you putting a downspout in it or a walkway or whatever you're gonna do. And our village engineer and public works staff take a look at it too. We'll typically issue it with a permit at that point. This is currently in our building code, but I think we even have a section in our zoning code already that says this, like you can't put an accessory structure in an easement. It could probably be worded better to say like what kind of easements and when it would come before you guys for a variance, but we don't take every single thing someone does in an easement and bring it before you.
Right.
Just in practice, practical matter. So if somebody's doing a gutter that goes a foot into an easement, if our village engineer looks at it and goes, okay, it's staying on your property, it's draining correctly, that was by design, that could get approved.
Right. Yeah, understood.
That
Yeah,
makes
it was a parcel I saw that, again, in Darien, where the back lot of was a dedicated easement, but it was all overhead power lines. And so somebody had, and even in the plans from like 1953, it said in the language that stuff could be put there as long as it was removable. And they put, the people that built they had like a removable deck. They never broke ground. So, and the utility company, like you said, was okay with it because they could easily access their power lines overhead and still come in and do maintenance. And they called Julie, and there was no other underground, utilities, so they got actually approval for that. But that was a different,
And I
entity.
think
But
what we're moving into here is interesting. It's more the parts of the actual structure itself. So like the eaves and the overhang is part
Right.
of like the principal structure itself, where if you're gonna put that into the easement by a foot, instead of just saying, I wanna get all those waivers, you should actually get rid of the easement, because you can no longer do what you want there.
Right.
The easement's kinda not serving its purpose for that point, so.
Right.
think
I was
that's
just thinking
why
if you
it's
did
in
have
there,
something
is-
right up against the easement, even if, and they say it's buried utilities, you probably don't want to have a, no gutter. If there's a pitched roof, you are gonna get, water directed there. So from a standpoint, if you have a gutter that's overhanging 6 to 8 inches, but it daylights it, not onto that easement, but that property itself. But again, this is just a hypothetical. When I saw that, I was reminded about some other projects, and I thought, well, there may be a unique case that comes in front. But generally speaking, it's good practice, and hopefully this is gonna be a very, very minor to non-existent issue. So with that said, those are my only comments on the language. I thought everything else looked pretty good. I agree with the other commissioners that it's good to get that in there. And as Commissioner Truxell said, hopefully there's not more being stuffed into it. And it sounds like that's the last of the bunch. But it looks good. It does look good.
Yeah, there may be other our zoning code isn't the best, it was written in 1978, so it's been kind of ad hoc change, so there's always stuff we want to change going forward, but this was the easy stuff to carry over, so nothing else we're gonna carry over from the building code, but
Okay.
I cannot promise this will be your last zoning code change, because I have plenty for our new employee Terrell to work on.
Okay. No worries. Is there any further discussion? And if there's anybody from the public wishing to speak, which there is not, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to recommend the village board amend various sections.
Oh, we gotta close the, yeah,
Close the hearing.
yeah.
So moved.
Okay, motion made to close the public hearing by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Merrick. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Dan, do you need to even go over the standards on this? Yeah.
There's no standard, so it's just straight to the motion. for
Okay, so we'll
text
move
amendment.
straight to the motion. So at this time, may I have a motion regarding this item?
Okay. I make a motion to recommend the village board amend various sections of the zoning ordinance as described in the May 5th, 2022 staff report and listed attachments as drafted red line text amendments of Section 3 general provisions and Section 8 off-street parking, regulating driveways, accessory structures, and other items previously regulated by the Tinley Park Comprehensive Building Code.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Tibbet. Lori, may I have a roll call?
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes?
Commissioner Merrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Tibbetts,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxell,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, the motion is carried. So this item's going to the village board, June 7th. Okay. Move on to the fourth and final item for this evening. Item 4 is a workshop for the extended stay hotels text amendment. And it's to consider a proposed text amendment to the Tinley Park zoning ordinance amending Section 2, Rules and Definitions, Section V, District Regulations, and Section 8, Off-Street Parking and Loading pertaining to defining and regulating extended stay hotels within certain zoning districts. Staff, if you could present your presentation at this time?
Sure. Yeah, and this is just a workshop, so what we do on these is the staff's basically presenting the work we've done. So get a text amendment or a project together, or it could be a petitioner asking for it, and what we're really looking for is just some initial feedback, so that way if we're way off and you guys are going, I don't think this is good for Tinley Park, go and adjust it before a public hearing and not have that debate at a public hearing, and we can get feedback if we have open items, but maybe discussion points we want, we kind of tee those up for you guys to kind of comment on them. So, this is really, speaking of zoning code text amendments, some of them are, maybe something's not just quite working, or sometimes there's just changes in design or preferences, or the market, which is really which this is coming into. So, extended stay hotels is kind of a sub-market of hotels in general, there's always been extended stay aspects to any hotel, so you can stay at a Hampton Inn and you could stay there for a month. And sometimes they have rooms that are kind of designed for that. But it's kind of more of a recent trend to have hotels that are geared towards that market. And that the majority of the people staying in there, or really who they're trying to get, are these people that would stay 3 days, a week, a month, 6 months, whatever they're really aiming to do. And so some of this is work-related or training-related. You could have a fire in your house and you need somewhere to temporarily stay. So there's a lot of reasons why you would stay in an extended stay hotel. And there's a number of different brands too, and most of these have emerged in kind of the last 10 to 20 years in terms of who they are and just kind of expanding nationwide. Most extended stay hotels do offer daily rates, so I know I've stayed in some of these here, and sometimes they function very similar to a hotel. The difference with these is they can also function very different than a hotel in some ways. And so you kind of have, they can start, they kind of are right on that line between a hotel or being kind of a residential dwelling in an apartment complex. So it really comes down to a lot of times the operations of these and how they work, how they operate. What are they actually doing? Are they a commercial hotel, or are they really gearing to, we want people to stay 6 months or a year and that's our market? Well, start to become a lot more like a residential dwelling. And where you'd want to locate those, what issues you could have, change a lot, right? Depending on, is it a visitor, is it someone here temporarily, or is it someone living here and is this their permanent home? So in that context, that's what we've looked at here, is kind of what's the best situation. Can we basically break off an extended stay hotel in our zoning code? Right now it loops that with a hotel, a motel. It would just be kind of looped into that all as one. What we kind of said is these maybe take some special scrutiny, so we want to take a new definition of an extended stay hotel, get that into our zoning code, and then basically make it a special use in any situation that a hotel is permitted. You can have an extended stay, but it takes that special use, and so that would come before you guys. They present their operations plan, the site, how it's going to work. You could look at the context of the area. You know, having one of these may not be a problem. Having 2 or 3 right next to each other could start to create a very different situation. So that is, and I guess for context, I got the picture of an extended stay hotel. They're often very similar to a hotel. They usually have kind of a kitchen area, so a full-size fridge, a stove, cabinets, something that you could cook in and maybe not go out to eat all the time if you're staying at a place for more than just a few days. And then they usually have sitting areas, kind of workstations. They're larger rooms, but what you typically don't get is kind of more the day-to-day service oriented. So you may not get daily cleaning. You may not have the front desk staff present 24/7. You may not have pools or things like that people expect more in the travel side of things. So we have one current extended stay hotel, which is Wood Spring Suites in the North Creek Subdivision and off I-80. That's fairly visible there. And then we had and are having one proposed. So it came through the Plan Commission pre-COVID, kind of stalled with COVID. And that was the Marriott Residence Inn. And they're back. They're looking to restart that project, so we're excited for that. So that would kind of be a potential second one that's on the horizon. But we've got phone calls for other ones and other sites in the village. There's always the potential you could have current hotels convert as well. And so what we want to do is just have some level of scrutiny to make sure those are going in the right place and aren't going to cause problems. And will be operated well. So what I think we've seen in our research is operations matters a lot with these, to whether they're, you know, Marriott has a very controlled aspect for, Homewood Suites, or that's, you know, they have a very controlled of what they want that to look like and be, compared to there might be some that are just, we'll take anybody and you don't have any kind of standards or operation plans. So, that's what we're looking at. Tinley Park's got a strong history of hotels here, primarily in 1990 is kind of when the influx came with the amphitheater, with our kind of entertainment area off of Harlem, I-80. So we currently have 11 hotels, the one extended stay out of those 11, and then our 12th hotel is currently under construction, which is Holiday Inn, who's been moving along with that. The village is also looking at doing licensing requirements, and that would basically be some additional requirements for all hotels, so not even just extended stays. That would basically ensure they have some security requirements, they're tracking who's staying there, and that you have to do that. They can't just go, we didn't have good records, so that'll be part of their licensing requirements. Allowing our police to access those, access security cameras, because we do have large amounts of people and security concerns that can come in here. So those are kind of coming hand in hand with these tweaks to the zoning code, just to make sure hotels in general and extended stays have kind of controls set to them. So here's our current regulations. Kind of loops any type of hotel, motel, motor inn, one use. It allows that as a special use in the B2. It's permitted in the B3 if it's on a 5-acre minimum lot. That's been varied from a number of times, so it can be permitted with a variation from the 5-acre minimum, and then it's permitted in the ORI and the M1 zoning districts. The 5-acre minimum's really there for, they were trying to promote more full-service hotels. So we have a lot of kind of limited service hotels. If you think about kind of, there's different levels of hotels from kind of economy to your highest end of like a Four Seasons. So we've had a lot of those that don't really have restaurants attached to them, kind of the full, don't have conference centers, banquet halls, you can have meetings there. So we have a lot of those, and that was kind of trying to push that they'd like some higher end brand hotels, they'd like some bigger hotels with those type of amenities. So we are keeping that, but what we are doing is, again, tweaking the hotel, motel, motor inn to a kind of more modern definition of what that means, but then breaking out extended stay as well. Staff worked with our attorneys on that definition and kind of went through, there's two ways you could think of an extended stay hotel, and that would be thinking about what the rooms are and physically what an extended stay room is. And then there's also, if you think about length of stay of somebody, what we didn't want to do is limit a normal hotel or from having some rooms that would be extended stay, or limiting, they go, look, we know you want to stay here 17 days, but sorry, the village's code says 15 and you gotta go. So our thought was really more of the rooms themselves, how they're designed and set up for this type of use. And then also drawing a hard line of some sort to say, what's the difference between a hotel and this extended stay? If a hotel can have these rooms too with a refrigerator and a stove, what's that hard line? So we kind of came up with a 30% to give some flexibility there to current hotels that have suites. So they might have a presidential or a honeymoon suite just in a normal hotel that is big, it's got these amenities. It would still allow those to be permitted in a normal hotel. So, any thoughts you guys have on those specific definitions, we'll gladly take from you. But then changes to the use chart is basically just taking those extended stays everywhere that a hotel is allowed. We've made it a special use for an extended stay. So, and then kept the acreage minimum as well. So it's just a slightly stricter scrutiny for extended stays than a normal hotel. That's all I have, so I'll send it back to you guys if you have any questions, comments, concerns.
Okay, thanks, Dan. We'll go to the commissioners for comments, for discussion. This is just a workshop, so Commissioner Tibbetts, any comments on the proposed text amendment?
No comment.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton?
The problem that we're trying to avoid from this is facilities suddenly becoming long-term residences when originally they were intended to be hotels. That's the issue.
Yeah, yeah, and just having a lot of people staying there for extended times can lead to just different abandoned vehicles, different types of crime, different types of people you get in there. But yeah, what you don't want to see is it start to transition to essentially an apartment complex, right? So.
Have you seen that in other neighborhoods? I mean, obviously, when you put this together, it wasn't out of, in a vacuum. And as you said, we only have the one in town, but we may soon have, with the two inquiries, more.
Yeah, and without all the data in front of me, our police have had concerns with the current one in town, having what they believe is kind of more issues at that one than they do at a typical hotel. But then even just a quick Google search and you can kind of see how even kind of some courts have kind of held, like, if somebody's getting their mail there and they're living in this place, that they're really a resident, right? So then you have eviction laws and things like that that kind of kick in and can be problematic, that even if a hotel wants to get rid of somebody, they can't by law. So our goal is to kind of try and make sure we have some teeth, that these aren't going to become those type of uses. They aren't going to start becoming more like residential uses, where that's not a bad use, but I don't think we want it in our commercial corridor then. We want it by parks, we want it by sidewalks, we want it to be in a residential setting that somebody would enjoy compared to North Creek Drive
And there's also
Right.
designated, apartment complexes and townhomes and condos and other things that are zoned for permanent resident, right? If somebody's
Yeah.
getting their mail there or their kids are going to the local school, then there's obviously some sort of issue, but,
Yeah,
I didn't mean to
and
cut.
we're not against those, right?
Right.
There's a different place for, I think,
Correct.
those than
Yeah,
where we're putting hotels.
you're right. And you have a stake in the neighborhood, right? You're
Yep.
right, so. Commissioner Hamilton, any more comments? Okay. Commissioner Truxell?
I think, Dan, you're spot on with the concerns you mentioned, security being top of mind for me.
Yeah.
Transients that may set up shop there, it's, you have a hard time. One, they're disrupting the rest of the residents. They're law-abiding, and maybe they aren't so much, and then having the teeth, like you say, to move people if you have to, right? So that can be touchy, and I'm glad you guys are paying attention to that, because that's pretty important, so. Placement, yeah, where do you put these places, and do you cluster them all in the same location? That's a good question, too, so, those are things that I'm concerned about, for right now. That's it for me.
Oh, okay, thanks, Commissioner
And any of
Truxell.
those concerns, but the why we do the special use, I guess, in the first place, is that instead of like us outlining, like, here's all the issues we have, and if you can meet all these, then you can do it. That kind of leaves it open to, let's look at the context, let's look at what they're doing. So any of those concerns, like clustering, operations, all that can come up with the
So do you
special-
have, like, I don't want to call it a laundry list, but do you have a list of concerns that you already are aware of and trying to address, that we could look at and see maybe you missed something, or?
They would essentially fit within the standards for a special use. So if you ever look if you look at those, when we bring one through here, there's one that has to do with morals, how it fits in with the surrounding area,
Yeah.
health and safety and security is in there, so.
So I know like with the
But I
marijuana
think, like, for each
dispensary,
special use, there's different concerns of why is it a special use? Sometimes it might be parking or traffic. This one, I think we'd be looking at what we're talking about here today.
right, so
Concerns.
seeing the operational procedures, I think is what we were looking at for Arise. That was good to see, right? Because right away, security's always the thing I think about. So I was just looking at their security procedures and monitoring and how they're hooked into the police department, things like that. So the operational aspect of these is right on too. So you definitely want to include that when we're reviewing these, when they come up. So, good point.
And history matters too, right? Like, has somebody done something, have they proven we do this? Well, can come up as part of that review too. So if it's somebody new who's never run an extended stay hotel and they go, here's what we're gonna do, like, that can be weighted differently than Hilton coming in here and going, we do this exactly the same
established
way and
procedures
we've
and
done it
standards.
100 times.
Yeah, they have standards and procedures that are well honed, right? Yeah.
Yeah. To Commissioner Truxell's point, in the staff report, the last sentence in page 2 of 3, it mentions any potential negative effects of an extended stay hotel can be compounded when located near each other or have a large number of rooms in one community. So as you were saying, like, limit, right? I know we were looking at, tobacco recently and trying to limiting clusters, so to speak. I think that type of idea would be, decent to have in the language, other than, okay, you can get a special use as long as it's in a B3, as long as it's 5 acres or more. Maybe we should be looking at, and I know most hotels here, I'm not naive, on Harlem, you got 9 of them, and then by LaGrange, you got 2. So they do tend to cluster. It's not like you want easy access.
Expressway driven.
Yeah, as Commissioner Merrick said, it's expressway driven. So I understand that. But to Commissioner Truxell's point, I agree with the security aspect. And I think in the staff report it mentioned, you can have people there for months on end, no background checks. And I'm not casting aspersions. My friend who works at the Mayo Clinic, he would come in town and to visit both him and his wife's family. They'd stay at, I can't remember the name of the hotel, but we'd visit there off of I-80, off of Joliet. It might have been a Homewood Suites. I can't remember, but, his neighbors, because he'd stay there for a week, one of his neighbors was a guy who was there for like 3 months because the pipes burst in his house and it was all flooded out, was undergoing work. So as the staff report mentioned, there can be all these different extenuating circumstances while somebody needs to have extended stay at a hotel that has amenities like a kitchen, so they're not eating out every night and, blowing their budget even more. But again, and I know this is on the flip side to what some of the Plan Commission has looked at with the short-term rentals. And those are primarily Airbnbs, where we also looked at the density of those to limit where people could get licenses to limit that. And I think that's a good idea. I know one of my friends runs one, and he's had some bad experiences with, people show these profiles and they look all good and then they trash the place. So you do have to, I think, cross your Ts and dot your Is to see, and I don't know what the procedures are for background checks or whatnot, but as Commissioner Truxell said, I do think for security, and I know you mentioned for all hotels it would be but does that also include all rentals, like short-term, in terms of security tracking us staying there? And I know Airbnbs, those don't seem to be as robust, maybe some people have cameras, but it keeps the neighborhood safe. But then, like, even the people in the hotel, right? They got their belongings in those hotel rooms. That hotel chain can't be, the best deterrent to somebody who wants to get in there, I would imagine. So, but I don't have the answer. I'm just agreeing with him on security. I think that is a primary point.
And I think we can bring that up, like, so if somebody applies for this, we usually go, so like a fitness center is a special use after a certain amount. When a fitness center comes in, we're going, the biggest concern is access and parking, you get these big waves. So that, and dog kennels are, and the dog kennels come in, we go, they're gonna be concerned about noise, they're gonna be concerned about smells, right? So there's, but you don't wanna lay all those out in our zoning code, because we kind of enough, we have enough in there. I know we've done it for a few, particularly with cannabis, because a lot of that attached to the state law, and it's such a unique thing right now, being new, federally illegals, still legal in the state. So that one, it's its own little special case, but just making it a special use makes it that any concerns you guys have can come up as part of that process. And maybe there's one that we haven't thought about here today that would still come
Okay.
up. So, that special use is a good catch-all to say, if we can look at all these different things that could be negative for our community, and we wanna make sure this, what you're presenting fits that, and then they're held to that going forward. If they start deviating from their plan, they don't have approval for that, right? So, anything they say at a public hearing, anything they present to you as part of that special use, they have to stick to that, or they'd have to come back and change it.
Another question, because I know in the beginning of the staff report, it mentioned extended stays, 3 days to many months, but actually in the language for the hotel extended stay, it says, the definition says intended or routinely utilized for weekly or monthly. So you want to say that it's got to be, what, are we defining weekly as exactly 7 days, or are we saying 5 days or more, or is it that 3 days or more?
That's where we didn't go into length of stay to
Yeah.
get specific. We got more specific with the types of rooms and the percentage of the rooms, and the type of uses. Because when we looked at other communities to see what have they done, and it's the ones that picked the days really struggle with, it's not really enforceable, and the reality is a lot of hotels are probably breaking it. So we kept that length
Okay.
of stay, just saying intended for kind of weekly and monthly, longer term stays. The hotel and leisure industry has a different definition of what an extended stay is in their mind, and for them, it's like anything over 3 days. But it's, we're looking at more, if somebody was here for 4 days, you could be visiting here for 4 days at the
Right.
conference center.
Right.
So that, we're looking at more, you're staying here for weeks, months, not
Right.
4 or 5 days. But we didn't want to set a specific day, hour, time on that.
Right.
But getting the point, the intent across on that.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Like the design aspects, I think still that's tough. But like at least with the special use designation, it gives at least some control with who's coming in. So, Commissioner Merrick.
Yeah, so I have a couple ones. I'm glad that we got rid of the word transient in the definition, because that's a really derogatory term, right? And it codes people in particular ways that doesn't necessarily need to be true. I'm interested in a couple things. One is the hotel extended stay gets rid of the range of things that we consider that might be it, right? And so it assumes that anything, so when we say hotel extended stay versus a hotel, but a hotel includes VRBOs and all these other things, right? It appears to, a
Yeah.
tourist home.
So we have a separate definition for short-term rentals, actually.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
and that's tucked away some other space? So if somebody would take you have a VRBO and I stay there for 6 months, and I start collecting mail at it, it's no longer a short-term residence either, right? It's become something else.
So, right before, I think only Commissioner Gray would have been here, but it would have been 2018, 2019, somewhere in there, we
Yeah.
did short-term rental, 2018 maybe. So we actually had a problem property in town that obviously triggered that. It's actually very strict, so we put, basically making sure they weren't next to each other, but they actually have to be owner-occupied units. So, from a security perspective, you can't just own a house in town and have it be a vacation rental in Tinley Park. So
Okay.
that wouldn't meet our zoning code and you couldn't get a license to do it. So it can't be a because that's a commercial use then, that's what we would say it is. If you're living there and you're renting out your room, or maybe it's your primary residence, but you're gone a couple months and you rent it out, you could do all of that, but it has to be a primary residence.
Got it. I was wondering why that wasn't in hotel extended stay.
Yeah,
Because
so
you
that
have
is
those
already
range of
broken
rooms.
out separately, like we have extended stay.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I'm looking at and thinking about here, though I don't know if it makes any sense, right, in the discussions we're having. So it's pretty clear, right, that extended stays in the 2008 housing bubble, lots of families ended up stuck in those spaces, right? Because they lacked alternatives, they lost their down payments, they weren't sure where to go, and those sorts of things. And we're trying to prevent that sort of stuff from being long-term here. You have a thing where we're talking about the types of rooms that are in them determine how we define them, which I think is good. But one way to handle this, other than making places be separated from each other, so you got one extended stay there, and then you make sure the other one's further away so you don't have that, could be putting caps on what percentage of rooms could have those, right? So that you end up having a mix of people who are there shorter term and others who would be there longer term, because you're not gonna stay long-term in a room that has no means of doing anything in it other than sleeping and perhaps a little workstation, right? So anyways, that was just a thought I had. But I'm not sure that anybody'd want to have an extended stay hotel where you're telling them you could only have 40% of the rooms have stovetops and other things, right?
I think that's what we're kind of doing. If it was under 30%, we
Right.
just classify it as a hotel. So like, you're a hotel, you can have those types of things. If you go over 30% of having those types of rooms, then you're an extended stay. So you're either gonna fit into one category or the
Sure.
other.
What I was
on that
suggesting
line.
though is, one way you could prevent some of the problems is by capping what percentage of the rooms could be extended stay types, right? You could say, here, you become extended stay by having 30% or more, but you could say something like, no place could have more than 50% that are extended stay, and then that would change the guest mixture in that space and potentially mitigate it. I'm not saying you should do it. The other way is making sure you don't have extended stay places right next to each other, which results in large numbers of people who are staying there but don't have.
I just want to piggyback. I know my wife and I, we've stayed at these Candlewood Suites, and whenever we get a chance, she likes to book those because they do have the kitchen and a refrigerator. And I don't know enough to know if all the rooms are decked out like that, but there may be certain brand hotels that, you know, it would, if you cap it at 50, would prevent a Candlewood Suites or whatever brand that does that full on. Now, I don't know if they do that in every room.
Most of these are 100% of the rooms. will have it.
Okay,
So that's
okay,
kind of
that's interesting.
That's kind of why they're extended stays, and they're focusing on that market as their primary one.
Got it. So
Not
that
they won't
wouldn't,
take
that
the
wouldn't
day.
work if we wanted to be open for business, then.
Yeah, it would be more or less prohibit, and granted, you guys could say, we don't even like these extended stays, we don't wanna prohibit that, we don't even like them at all. And so that would be up to you guys or the board to say that. What we're doing is making it a little better, not going that far, knowing there is some need, and there is still some positive aspects, because we have businesses in town that use these for training. I know we had talked, Canadian National, like, rents large blocks of room
Yep.
for their training facility in Homewood, and people stay here for months. So there is some benefit. Those are
They
added
stay at the
tax
high end
dollars
at
that are still
food.
eating,
Yeah,
shopping.
For real, they do. Yeah.
So,
No, and we just had Mack trucks, right?
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
yeah.
They fly in and then they're there for a week
And
and
those,
then they're
and,
done.
and they would rather have the stove where they can cook
So we're not
something,
gonna-
heat
yep.
something up, they have a full fridge, they can put stuff in. I like them too, I just went to Milwaukee.
Not
and
Burger
stayed in
King
a
every
Homewood
night?
Suites, yeah. And it's just nice to have a full fridge and a
Right.
freezer.
It's cheaper too.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
And that's another part of these, like having, extended stays can be cheaper than traditional hotels. But if you had too many extended stays, it could start hurting your normal hotels because they have to compete with that on a daily basis. So that is a concern we've heard from hotels, is this is hurting us economically, could hurt us economically overall. If you had too many of these in one area. So another concern that could come up with a special use would just be, how many do we have? And
Is
this-
that Marriott
this-
Residence Inn, is that 100%?
Yeah, I mean, I
Long-term?
don't know if they have a couple that don't, but their whole purpose is to have, pretty much every room is. And that one is an extended stay, and it's kind of highest of the lot. So even within the extended stay industry, they have top tier, middle tier, economy tier.
Okay.
They're considered the highest with like Hilton's Homewood Suites.
Okay.
Kind of seen as the top, I believe.
I do have a comment I want to add about the definitions, like for hotel, motel, or motor inn for the proposed new definition. I just want to make sure I get the intent of this right. The last line says, hotel does not include living accommodations provided at any governmental or nonprofit institution in connection with the functions of that institution. So is that something like a shelter, like a public entity, or
I'm
a?
gonna ask our attorney why I put that in there. I think it might be like, if we had the mental health center, if we
Or
had a.
Army
prison,
barracks.
A prison is not a hotel.
Yeah.
I think it's more to take those, firehouse, like, get bunks in there, so I think
Ah.
it's more geared towards that type
Okay.
of stuff to say,
It might be, if you talk with the attorney, just to get more specific language,
yeah.
or at least an
That-
example.
that-
It is kind of
I
vague.
didn't put that in there, and if you read it, you could tell it just screams our attorney on it. Like, it's taking, there's a situation why that's in there, so I can ask him.
Okay. Any more comments, Commissioner Merrick? And I was just piggybacking and echoing on some of the comments that our commissioners said. I think that, let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. I think that's it. I think it's a good step. I think you guys did a good job of being kind of proactive on this, to get a hold of it before it becomes a problem. So that, you know, businesses can thrive and the community can be safe and served well. With that, I have no other comments. Does anybody else have anything to add? So Dan, do you have enough for,
I do.
okay,
I'll get back to you with a few clarifications there. Yeah, we'll be back at the next meeting.
okay, excellent. Okay, so there'll be a public hearing and then on the second, oh, good. So we'll move on from that workshop to the good of the order. Do you have anything to present, staff?
Yeah, I'll do it as quick as the last time, too. D.R. Horton was approved for their subdivision at the old Panduit site, so
Nice.
I know they're trying to move quickly, so we'll start seeing, I think, dirt moving and roads going in for townhomes and single-family homes there. I think strongly needed in that area for
Yeah.
new homes. It's been a while, so it'll be good to see. Anytime Fitness was approved, that went before you guys for their special use changing owners. The two fence variations moved past the first reading. There was some pretty long discussion even at village board, so I've carried on from here to village board, and they're still discussing it. So they voted to move it through first reading to final reading, but there wasn't, that was just to move it forward, so there was no consensus on it yet. But that'll be at the next village board meeting, both of the variations that were before you. And again, they're not taking those lightly, so not the requests and not the recommendations that came from you guys. So the village board is looking through everything. You know, rarely do you get those that really have kind of split votes and a lot of discussion. So they're diving into it as well. Loyola started construction today, I believe today, so that the Loyola Medical Center on 179th Street in LaGrange, they'll be moving on that. I think you'll see it up really quickly. They have a pretty aggressive timeline here now that they got county approval.
So they got all the permits. I know that was the last
Yep.
meeting they were here? Okay, good.
Yep, I have the county's signature on the plat, so we are, they're rolling. Primal Cuts patio and the right-of-way agreement, which didn't come before you guys, but since that extends into the right-of-way a little bit, that was approved, so they'll have kind of that enclosed front patio that Paul that was here today is working on. That's all I have. Next meeting is June 2nd, and we have 4 items on that, so we're, pretty much every meeting from here through July is gonna have 4 or 5 items and a lot of stuff going on, so it's good to see.
That's good.
What's happening with Magnuson?
Their permit is in and under review, so they submitted it prior to they had a deadline, that they hit, so it's under review. I think we are getting them comments soon and revisions, there's
Okay.
revisions needed. So they'll have to turn around those revisions
Yeah,
to
I
us.
see some
soon.
electrical trucks out there, but there's not much going on at all, really.
I know they've cleaned it up a little bit, and they fixed some of the, like, erosion control fencing and stuff like that. So they're not gonna be starting work anytime soon, but I think they're trying to clean it up. which is
The
good.
neighborhood was displeased with how they were leaving it, you know.
Yeah, I think there's still bricks out, pile of bricks out
I
there.
saw the
but,
pile of bricks, yeah.
Otherwise, they're trying to keep it clean, I think, and hopefully they'll move forward with that quickly.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Yep. That's all I got.
Okay, Dan, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, for our new commissioners, if they want to introduce themselves, give a 1-minute background or less, whatever they're
It's
comfortable with.
up to you guys.
Yeah.
You cannot do it or just say
Yeah,
hello.
that's fine. Brian Tibbetts. I am a Tinley Park resident over on 174th Street. I am currently employed by Northwestern Medicine. I'm a project manager for construction safety. I currently, my regional areas are west and south, so I handle Marion Joy, Central DuPage Hospital, Delmore Hospital, Kishwaukee, Sandwich, Palis, all of their ambulatory facilities in those areas. I deal with IBC, ICC, HLA, FGI, all of those codes all day long to keep our construction projects compliant and our patients safe all at the same time. So this is kind of right up
It
Yeah,
is.
my
excellent,
alley.
yeah.
We should have had you during Loyola's
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
Or not, I don't know. You might have been really strict on them, but,
Welcome aboard, Brian.
yeah.
I do have a couple of friends that work for that company that wish they were that close to that job site, but they're not, so. You never get that
No,
when you're working for a company.
you gotta drive like 2 hours away, yeah,
Mhm.
of course.
Yeah, because before I worked for Northwestern, I was with Turner Construction for 10 years. And then before that, I was with Illinois Masonry for about 6 years.
Okay,
So,
excellent, great. Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes, hi, Terry Hamilton, a longtime resident of Tinley Park. We've been here since 1985. Raised our 4 kids here, all the way from elementary school through Tinley Park High School. Love the village, been an awesome place, and I'm pleased to have an opportunity to help keep the village growing and, a great place for future families. My background is pretty checkered. I have an engineering degree from Purdue. I'm actually a licensed professional engineer in Illinois. I was working construction for past 10 years in Chicago, demolition excavation for Taylor Excavating Construction. They don't get down this far, but we were in the city for a long time. Right now I'm doing something a little different as I'm transitioning into my older age, working in a family business with import and export, but have some experience in construction and the engineering. And so the terms are familiar, but it's interesting to see formally, right, and legally how everything is progressing. So happy to be here and hope I can make a positive contribution.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Welcome aboard. Yeah,
It's great to be here.
excellent. At this time, we'll move to receiving comments from the public. Seeing no public here, we'll move on to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to close the public, the Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Truxell, seconded by Commissioner Tibbetts. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, opposed, say no. Okay, the motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned at 8:49 PM. Okay, Have a good night, everyone.